The bridge lights flickered red as Admiral Krath watched the blue planet grow larger on his view screen. Earth, the forbidden world. 300 warships surrounded his flagship, the greatest armada the Valorian Empire had ever assembled. He clicked his mandibles in satisfaction. Today, the Empire would prove that humans were nothing but primitives hiding behind exaggerated legends. Commander Venn approached the Admiral with obvious confusion spreading across his three-eyed face. His voice carried uncertainty as he read the sensor data aloud. The human homeworld showed no orbital defense platforms. No weapon satellites circled the planet. No military installations appeared on any scan. Earth looked completely defenseless, like a fruit waiting to be plucked from a tree. Krath pulled up the Galactic Council warning on his display. The red letters blazed across the screen with their dire message. All spacefaring civilizations were forbidden to enter Terran space. Humans were classified as an extreme threat. Any approach was banned by Council law. The Admiral had read these warnings 100 times, and each time he laughed harder than before. The crew around him joined in the mockery. Junior officers pointed at the warnings and made jokes about scared Council members. Everyone knew the truth. Humans had achieved faster-than-light travel only 15 years ago. Their colonies numbered 43 across 12 systems. Their fleet contained barely 200 ships. The Valorian Empire had conquered 47 star systems in the past decade alone. What could these primitives possibly do against such power? Krath leaned back in his command chair and studied the intelligence reports one more time. 300 years ago, humans had apparently defeated some minor mining fleet. The Krell's sovereignty had sent ships to harvest Earth's resources, and somehow the humans had won. But that was ancient history. Technology had advanced. Tactics had evolved. Whatever tricks the humans had used centuries ago would be useless against modern Valorian weapons. A communication alert interrupted his thoughts. Venn activated the incoming transmission without waiting for orders. A human woman appeared on the main screen. She wore a military uniform with commander insignia on her shoulders. Her eyes were gray and cold like winter storms. Her expression showed no fear, no anger, only a strange calm that made several crew members shift uncomfortably. She identified herself as Commander Rita Hayes of Earth Defense Command. Her voice remained flat and emotionless as she delivered her warning. The Valorian fleet had violated Galactic Council Directive 7741. They had 30 seconds to reverse course and leave Terran space immediately. No negotiations, no discussions. Just a simple ultimatum delivered with mechanical precision. Krath felt rage building in his chest. This primitive dared to threaten him? He leaned toward the screen and began explaining exactly how powerless Earth truly was. His sensors showed no defenses. Human ships were scattered across distant colonies. Earth had nothing that could stop 300 Valorian warships from taking whatever they wanted. Hayes interrupted him mid-sentence. 15 seconds, she said. Nothing more. The Admiral's anger exploded. He started to give the order to advance to show this human the price of disrespect. His finger moved toward the command panel. His mouth opened to speak the words that would seal humanity's fate. Then the moon moved. At first, Krath thought his sensors were malfunctioning, but every display showed the same impossible sight. Earth's moon was changing. The gray surface that had remained unchanged for billions of years began to shift and separate. Massive sections of lunar rock slid apart like doors opening in slow motion. Beneath the ancient dust and craters, metal gleamed in the starlight. Venn's voice cracked with panic as he read the energy signatures. The readings made no sense. The moon was not a natural satellite. It was a construct, a weapon platform disguised as a celestial body. Enormous structures emerged from beneath the false surface. Rail cannons 3 kilometers long extended toward space. Power collectors the size of cities began glowing with contained energy. Point defense grids spread across the lunar surface like a spider's web of death. Hayes continued speaking as if nothing unusual was happening. She explained that 3 centuries ago, the first alien visitors had not come in peace. They had come to strip mine Earth and enslave humanity. She asked Krath if he knew what humans had done in response. Her tone remained conversational, almost friendly. Krath could not answer. His voice had died in his throat. His sensors were screaming warnings from every direction. Mars was moving now. The red planet's surface began revealing hidden weapons. Venus showed similar transformations. The asteroid belt started maneuvering with purpose. Thousands of rocks that should have been drifting aimlessly were now moving into attack formations. Hayes provided the answer to her own question. Humans had won that ancient war. Then they had spent 300 years making absolutely certain no one would ever threaten Earth again. Every planet in the solar system had been weaponized. Every moon converted into a fortress. Every asteroid turned into a kinetic weapon platform. Humanity had not reached for the stars because they did not need to expand. They were perfectly content to stay home, as long as everyone else stayed away. The commander's expression finally showed emotion. Pity. She explained that the Council had not marked Terran space as forbidden to punish humanity. They had done it as an act of mercy. Mercy for species like the Valorians who might be foolish enough to ignore the warnings. Krath reached desperately for the retreat command. His hands shook as he tried to order his fleet to escape. But before the words left his mouth, weapons fired across the solar system. Not at his flagship, at the space behind it. The entire Valorian fleet found itself trapped in a cage of pure energy. Faster than light travel became impossible. They were caught like insects in amber. Hayes delivered the final truth with quiet certainty. The Council directive had been clear. This was Krath's mistake, but his entire fleet would pay the price. She asked if he finally understood why humans were forbidden. Then she gave an order that would haunt him forever. Activate the defense grid. Full engagement protocol. Show them what 3 centuries of paranoid human engineering looks like. The distress signal tore through the Galactic Council chambers like a scream in the darkness. High Counselor Thane watched the transmission freeze his fellow council members in their seats. Admiral Krath's face filled the central hologram, his features twisted with terror that no Valorian warrior should ever show. The proud admiral was begging for help. The transmission cut to an external view. 200 council members sat in stunned silence as they watched the Valorian dreadnought being systematically taken apart. But the attackers were not using missiles or energy beams. Small craft swarmed over the massive warship like surgical insects. Each drone peeled away armor plating with horrifying precision. They were not destroying the ship. They were dissecting it piece by piece while the crew remained trapped inside. Counselor Brent spoke first, his crystalline body resonating with shock. The humans were not killing the Valorians. They were harvesting technology, studying every system while simultaneously neutralizing the entire fleet. The drones moved with inhuman coordination, as if controlled by a single vast intelligence that could think 1,000 thoughts at once. Counselor Mara rose from her seat, her 4 arms gesturing at the hologram with obvious distress. The military expert pointed out something that made the situation even worse. Humans were not using their primary weapons. Everything happening to the Valorian fleet was just the opening move. The real defenses had not even activated yet. Thane closed all 6 of his eyes and felt the weight of centuries pressing down on his scales. He had warned the Valorian Emperor personally 12 cycles ago. He had delivered the Council directive himself, explaining in detail why Terran space was forbidden. But Emperor Drax had laughed in his face. Young empires always thought they knew better than the Council's ancient wisdom. Mara turned to face the assembly with accusation in her voice. She asked how many council members had actually read the original contact reports, the unredacted versions that explained exactly why humans were so dangerous. The silence that followed told her everything she needed to know. Most council members simply enforced the directives without understanding them. They saw the warnings but never questioned their origins. She activated a new holographic display that showed events from 317 years ago. The Krell sovereignty had discovered Earth when humans were still confined to their home planet. The Krell saw a primitive civilization with no space defenses and rich natural resources. They sent a mining fleet of 300 ships, the same number the Valorians had just sent. The hologram showed the Krell fleet approaching Earth with absolute confidence. The Krell were apex predators who had conquered dozens of systems. Their weapons could shatter continents. Their shields could withstand nuclear detonations. They expected humans to surrender after a brief show of force. Human cities launched conventional rockets as the Krell fleet entered orbit. The aliens laughed as their shields deflected the primitive weapons easily. But then something strange happened. The rockets that failed did not simply fall back to Earth. They maneuvered. They dodged return fire. They began moving in patterns that suggested learning and adaptation. Mara explained what the Council was witnessing. Humans called them adaptive munitions. Each missile that failed transmitted its data to the next wave. Within hours, human weapons were evolving faster than Krell defenses could adjust. By the end of the first day, Krell's shields that had protected them for centuries became completely useless. Ships began exploding across Earth's orbit. The Krell fleet retreated and began orbital bombardment protocols. If they could not conquer Earth, they would destroy it from space. Massive energy beams lanced down toward Earth's cities. Buildings exploded in flames. Entire districts vanished in clouds of fire and dust. Then the camera view shifted to show something that made several council members gasp. The burning cities were empty. Enormous doors opened in the ground beneath the destruction. Humans emerged from underground shelters, completely unharmed. The surface cities had been decoys. The real population centers were miles underground, protected by layers of rock and reinforced metal. Thane took over the explanation with a voice heavy with old memories. Humans had built their civilization in layers. The Krell bombardment destroyed empty buildings, while millions of humans watched safely from below. Then the real counterattack began. Massive hatches opened across Earth's surface. But these were not shelters. They were launch tubes. Telephone pole-sized metal rods shot into space, accelerated to speeds approaching a significant fraction of light speed. No explosives. No warheads. Just solid tungsten moving with enough kinetic energy to punch through anything. The hologram showed Krell shields trying to activate against the incoming projectiles. Energy barriers that could disperse laser weapons and deflect plasma bolts flickered uselessly. These were not energy weapons. They were solid metal moving at relativistic speeds. Physics became the ultimate weapon. A Krell dreadnought split in half as a tungsten rod passed through it like paper. Another ship exploded when kinetic penetrators struck its reactor core. Within minutes, the pride of the Krell sovereignty was reduced to burning debris. Mara stated the final casualty numbers with quiet intensity. 96% losses. 300 ships became fewer than 12 survivors. The Krell sovereignty ceased to exist as a major galactic power within a year. The dozen ships that escaped brought footage back to the Council. The directive to avoid Terran space was issued immediately. A young counselor from the Pax Federation asked the question that everyone was thinking. 3 centuries had passed since the Krell invasion. Surely humans had evolved beyond such brutality. They had been peaceful for hundreds of years, staying quietly within their territory. Perhaps the danger had been exaggerated. Thane's response cut through the chamber like a blade. Humans stayed in their territory because the Council had begged them to stay. After defeating the Krell, humanity did not celebrate or move on. They militarized everything. Every planet in their solar system became a weapon. Every moon transformed into a fortress. They developed technology centuries ahead of their time. The worst part was what happened next. 300 years of continuous innovation with no external wars to fight. No conflicts to distract them. All of humanity's creativity and intelligence focused on a single question. How could they make absolutely certain that no one would ever threaten Earth again? Mara pointed at the tactical display showing the Valorian fleet's current status. This was the answer to that question. 3 centuries of paranoid human engineering. Humanity had not been peaceful. They had been preparing. Building weapons, designing defenses, creating systems that could operate automatically without any human intervention required. The Council had not marked Terran space as forbidden to punish humanity. They had done it out of terror. Terror of what would happen if humans decided to stop defending and started attacking. If humanity ever chose to leave their fortress and bring their weapons to the galaxy. The debate that followed would determine the future of galactic civilization, and everyone knew it. Commander Rita Hayes stood 3 miles beneath the Colorado mountains, watching screens that showed the Valorian fleet dying slowly in Earth's grip. The defense grid had every enemy ship locked in energy fields that made escape impossible. Swarms of automated drones were methodically disabling weapons systems across 300 vessels. Her finger hovered over a single button that would end it all. One press would activate the primary weapons. Luna's massive rail cannons would turn the Valorian armada into expanding clouds of debris within seconds. Lieutenant James Park broke the tense silence with urgent news. The Galactic Council was transmitting. High Counselor Thane himself wanted to speak directly with Commander Hayes. The request carried weight that could not be ignored. Rita considered her options carefully. Earth's defense protocols were absolute. Eliminate threats. Secure territory. Maintain perimeter integrity. For 300 years, those rules had kept humanity safe. But she had also studied enough history to know that sometimes the political battle mattered as much as the military one. Perhaps more. She gave the order to open the communication channel. The holographic display shimmered and solidified into the image of an elderly Vrex. His silver scales looked dimmer than official portraits suggested. All 6 of his eyes showed exhaustion that came from centuries of difficult decisions. Thane began speaking with careful diplomatic precision. He requested an immediate cessation of hostilities on behalf of the entire Galactic Council. His voice carried genuine concern rather than commanding authority. Rita's response came out cold as deep space ice. The Valorian Empire had violated the Council's own directive. They had invaded Terran space with clear hostile intent. Her protocols left no room for negotiation. The threat would be eliminated according to established defense doctrine. The counselor acknowledged her position but made a different argument. He was not asking her to violate protocols. He was asking her to show mercy, the same mercy that had defined humanity's reputation among those who actually understood Earth's history. Rita raised an eyebrow at his words. Earth's reputation in the galaxy was that of dangerous isolationists who threatened anyone foolish enough to approach. The Council's own warnings had created that image over centuries. Thane corrected her gently. That reputation existed only among civilizations that had never read the complete reports. Those who had studied the Krell incident knew a different truth. Humanity could have hunted down every escaping Krell vessel. The technology and capability existed, but humans had let them go. They had allowed survivors to carry the warning back to the galaxy. He leaned forward in the hologram with intensity burning in his ancient eyes. The point had been made with the Valorians. Their fleet was neutralized. Their admiral would report everything he had witnessed. Complete destruction would create martyrs instead of lessons. It would give militant factions in other empires justification for revenge. The incident would transform from a warning into a declaration of total war. Rita drummed her fingers on the console in thought. Thane was asking humanity to remain the monster hiding in the darkness, to be the fearsome legend that kept aggressive empires cautious. Playing the role of galactic boogeyman served a strategic purpose that pure military victory could not achieve. The counselor shifted his argument to moral grounds. He asked humanity to remain true to its fundamental nature, defensive and prepared, absolutely, but not genocidal, not conquerors built on violence. The moment humans crossed that line, they would become no different than the Krell or the Valorians, just another empire that used superior force to dominate others. Rita tried to argue that Earth had not started this confrontation. The Valorians had chosen to invade despite clear warnings. Thane interrupted with agreement. The Valorians were fools who ignored the Council directive and now faced appropriate consequences. But 5,000 individual beings crewed those ships. 5,000 people who had followed orders from commanders drunk on imperial arrogance. Did they all deserve death for their leaders' mistakes? Rita thought about her family history. Her great-great-great-grandmother had survived the Krell, bombardment in the underground shelters, beneath New York. She had later become one of the chief engineers, who designed Luna's transformation into a battle station. The family lesson had been passed down through generations with absolute clarity. Never again would Earth be vulnerable. Never again would humanity trust its safety to alien goodwill. But her ancestor had taught a second lesson that was discussed less frequently. The words came back to Rita across the years. We fight to protect, not to conquer. The moment we become the invaders, we lose everything that makes us human. Rita made her decision. She ordered Lieutenant Park to broadcast on all frequencies. Valorian vessels had 60 seconds to power down all weapons and prepare for boarding. Any ship that failed to comply would be destroyed without hesitation. Any ship that surrendered would be escorted to the edge of Terran space and released with a message. The warning was not a challenge. It was a courtesy that should have been respected. She turned back to Thane's hologram with a new proposition. The Valorians would be spared, but humanity wanted something in return: truth and transparency. The counselor's eyes narrowed as he asked what Earth desired. Rita explained her demand with perfect clarity. For 300 years, the Council had kept humanity isolated. Terran space was marked forbidden, which provided useful protection, but it also kept information away from Earth. Humanity knew almost nothing about the greater galaxy, except what the Council chose to reveal. That would change now. Thane began explaining that information control existed for humanity's protection. Rita cut him off firmly. Information control existed because the Council feared what humans would do with complete knowledge. If they wanted Earth to stay in its fortress, humanity would comply. But ignorance was no longer acceptable. Open the databases. Share technology records. Let humanity decide how to engage with the galaxy based on complete information, rather than controlled fragments. The counselor pointed out that such transparency would fundamentally change galactic power dynamics forever, Rita agreed without hesitation. Currently, humanity served as a mysterious threat that kept younger races cautious. But that only worked as long as humans cooperated with the arrangement. She had authority to turn the Valorian fleet into debris. She also had authority to activate protocols that would send every human warship toward Valorian space to finish what the Empire had started. Thane accused her of blackmailing the entire Galactic Council. Though respect colored his tone, Rita corrected his terminology. This was negotiation, not blackmail. The Council wanted humanity to remain defensive rather than offensive, then give Earth reasons to defend more than just itself. Share intelligence on emerging threats. Grant observer status in Council discussions. Let humanity see the galaxy as something worth protecting instead of an endless source of potential invasion forces. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. Finally, Thane closed his eyes and nodded slowly. The Galactic Council chamber erupted into chaos as representatives from 200 civilizations shouted over each other. High Counselor Thane stood at the center platform watching democracy turn into a screaming match. Beside him, Commander Rita Hayes appeared as a holographic projection. Her expression calm despite the anger directed at her species from every corner of the vast room. Admiral Krath stood in the accused section with his uniform torn and his pride shattered. Behind him, massive holographic displays showed the Valorian fleet in its current state. Disabled ships drifted in formation while human boarding teams methodically removed every weapon system. The mighty armada that had conquered 47 star systems now looked like training dummies being used to teach a brutal lesson. Thane called the session to order with difficulty. This emergency meeting would address the Valorian violation of Directive 7741. But more importantly, it would decide the future relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. Every representative understood that history was being written in this chamber today. Emperor Drax of the Valorian Empire materialized as a hologram, his massive form shimmering with barely controlled rage. His voice boomed across the chamber like thunder. The humans had humiliated his greatest fleet. They had treated Valorian warriors like disobedient children. This outrage demanded immediate retaliation and severe consequences. Rita's voice cut through his bluster like a knife through paper. She asked the Emperor what exactly he thought demanded action. Retaliation against a species that had shown mercy when complete destruction was justified. His admiral violated Council law. His ships invaded restricted territory with clear hostile intent. 5,000 Valorians were alive at this moment only because humanity chose restraint over revenge. She leaned forward in her holographic form with challenge burning in her eyes. She invited Emperor Drax to finish his sentence. What did this situation actually demand? The Emperor sputtered and stammered, but no coherent words emerged from his mouth. The logic was too clear to argue against. He had sent warriors to conquer and they had been defeated. Nothing about that equation suggested humanity owed anyone an apology. Counselor Mara of the Telnari rose from her seat, her forearms spread in a gesture that commanded attention. The real question before the council had nothing to do with punishment. The Valorian Empire had already been punished more than adequately. The actual issue was integration. Commander Hayes had proposed that humanity receive observer status on the Council plus full access to galactic databases. This represented a complete shift in 3 centuries of established policy. Counselor Brent of the Kix Collective spoke next, his crystalline body resonating with measured reason. Humanity had proven beyond doubt that they could defend themselves against any threat. Perhaps the time had come to stop treating humans as a danger to be contained. Maybe they should be engaged as a civilization with valuable contributions to offer. Ambassador Kelvar of the Hrax Dominion shot to his feet with objection written across his features. Humans were dangerous by definition. Everyone had seen the reports showing 300 years of continuous military innovation. If the Council granted them access to galactic technology, star charts, and classified information about other civilizations, humanity would become unstoppable. They would learn every weakness in galactic defenses. Rita interrupted with calm certainty. Humanity would use that information to better protect themselves and others. Earth did not want to conquer the galaxy. They wanted to ensure the galaxy could not conquer them. The distinction mattered more than Ambassador Kelvar seemed to understand. The ambassador challenged her directly. History showed that defensive powers inevitably became offensive powers once they achieved security. First came safety, then desire for resources, then territorial expansion. Every empire in the galaxy had followed that pattern eventually. Rita responded with brutal honesty. The ambassador was projecting his own civilization's trauma onto humanity. She had reviewed Hrax Dominion history thoroughly. They had been invaded twice before becoming an aggressive expansion power. The Hrax learned that offense was the best defense, but that was not humanity's lesson. She activated a holographic timeline showing Earth's development over 3 centuries. Humanity had been invaded exactly once. Their response was not to conquer neighbors or build an invasion fleet. Humans had no neighbors within 50 light years anyway. Instead, they had made their home system completely impregnable. 300 years of capability to build conquest fleets, and Earth had never done it. Rita stated the numbers clearly. Humanity's entire offensive fleet consisted of 43 warships. 162 additional vessels were purely defensive platforms that could not operate outside the solar system. For 3 centuries, Earth had possessed the industrial capacity and technical knowledge to challenge any empire in the chamber. Instead, they had built fortresses rather than invasion forces. The difference between humanity and the Hrax Dominion was fundamental. The Hrax learned that controlling others provided security. Humans learned that preventing others from controlling them was enough. True security did not require dominating the galaxy. It only required making domination impossible. Thane raised his hand to restore order as arguments exploded across the chamber. The formal proposal was clear enough. Humanity sought integration rather than continued isolation. They requested information sharing and observer status. In exchange, they offered their considerable defensive expertise to any council member who requested assistance. A minor ambassador from a smaller civilization laughed mockingly. What could the galaxy possibly learn from humans that it did not already know? Counselor Mara responded quietly, but her words carried devastating weight. She had personally reviewed technical data from the Valorian encounter. Human defensive systems were 40 to 70 years ahead of the best technology available to any other civilization. Their adaptive algorithms alone would revolutionize warfare. Their kinetic weapons made conventional shields obsolete. Their automated response networks could coordinate millions of defensive units simultaneously. Any single one of those innovations would shift the balance of galactic power. All of them together could end the era of aggressive expansion permanently. If every civilization had access to human defensive technology, the cost of invasion would become economically impossible. No empire could sustain the losses required to overcome adaptive defenses. The chamber fell into stunned silence as the implications sank in. Ambassador Kelvar voiced what everyone was thinking. This would fundamentally change how galactic power worked at the most basic level. If defense became cheaper and more effective than offense, the entire structure of interstellar relations would collapse and rebuild itself. Rita agreed without hesitation. Change was exactly what the galaxy needed. The emergency broadcast cut through the bridge of the EDS Guardian like a knife. Captain Marcus Webb watched the distress signal flash red across his screens. A colony called Harvest was under attack. 6 raider vessels surrounded the agricultural world, bombarding settlements where 5,000 civilians had nowhere to run. The local defense force had already been destroyed. Harvest was dying. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka turned from her navigation station with urgency written across her face. The colony was outside Terran space, outside any territory where Earth Defense Command had jurisdiction, but they were close enough to respond. The Guardian could reach them in 20 minutes if they pushed the engines hard. Marcus stared at the tactical display and felt 300 years of human doctrine colliding with something new. His entire career had been dedicated to keeping threats away from Earth. He had trained to defend humanity's fortress, not to venture into the galaxy saving strangers. The Guardian was a diplomatic vessel, not a warship. They had been en route to the Nexus Coalition station for meetings, not combat operations. Commander David Stone spoke carefully from the tactical station. They had defensive systems and some light weapons, but engaging 6 raiders went far beyond their mission parameters. The Guardian had been built to talk and observe, not to fight pitched battles in foreign space. Marcus looked at the distress signal again. 5,000 civilians, families and farmers who had never done anything except grow food and try to live peaceful lives. Raiders were bombarding their cities because these people could not defend themselves. The strong were destroying the weak, just like they had for thousands of years across the galaxy. He made his decision with absolute clarity. Activate all defensive protocols. Set course for Harvest at maximum speed. They were going to help those people whether it fell within their jurisdiction or not. Stone objected with valid concerns. Their orders were to observe council proceedings, not engage in military actions outside Terran space. Earth Defense Command had not authorized combat operations this far from home. They could start an interstellar incident. Marcus cut him off firmly. They were human, which meant they defended people who could not defend themselves. For 300 years, Earth had promised the galaxy that humanity would never again be victims. Now they had a chance to extend that promise to others. This was what Earth Defense Command existed to do, even if the orders had not caught up with the reality yet. The Guardian broke orbit and accelerated toward Harvest. Marcus spent the flight reviewing everything he knew about raid tactics. These were not organized military forces. Raiders operated with minimal coordination, relying on overwhelming firepower against undefended targets. They picked on the weak because strong opponents would destroy them easily. Harvest appeared on the view screen as a green and blue marble marred by fires burning across 2 continents. The 6 raider vessels were medium-sized craft with heavy weapons but outdated shields. They positioned themselves in orbital bombardment formation, pouring energy beams down onto helpless cities below. Stone provided tactical assessment with professional detachment. The raiders were using old technology and sloppy positioning. Their shield generators were exposed. Their formation had gaps that could be exploited. One properly equipped vessel could drive them off, maybe capture them all if the response was coordinated correctly. Marcus gave the order without hesitation. Deploy all defensive drones. Target their engines with kinetic interceptors. Non-lethal protocols if possible, but those colonists down there were the priority. If the raiders refused to surrender, disable them permanently. What happened next would become required study material at military academies across the Council space. The Guardian released a cloud of defensive drones that spread across orbital space in seconds. Each drone moved with perfect coordination, guided by adaptive algorithms that had been refined over 3 centuries. The raiders tried to target the small craft with their weapons, but the drones learned from every near miss and adjusted instantly. Kinetic interceptors launched from the Guardian's external pods. Solid tungsten slugs accelerated to high velocity and struck each raider vessel's engine section with surgical precision. No explosives, no energy signatures that shields could disperse. Just metal and physics doing what they had done to the Krell 300 years ago. Within 8 minutes, all 6 raider vessels were drifting helplessly in orbit. Their weapons offline, their engines disabled, their crews alive but completely neutralized by a single diplomatic ship that had not even deployed its primary weapons. Tanaka reported incoming transmission from Harvest's surface. The colonists were broadcasting on every frequency. Marcus authorized the communication and found himself looking at faces streaming with tears, men and women and children who had thought they were about to die. Instead, they had been saved by strangers from a species most of them had only heard about in frightening stories. The colony administrator tried to speak, but emotion choked her words. She finally managed to thank Earth for sending help, for proving that someone in the galaxy actually cared about protecting the weak instead of exploiting them. Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. For 300 years, humanity had protected Earth because no one else would. Now they had the chance to be what they needed 3 centuries ago. The people who arrived when the universe got dark. The civilization that showed up when others had given up hope. He ordered Stone to prepare a detailed report for Earth Defense Command. Include recommendation to deploy defensive platforms at vulnerable border colonies. Not human colonies exclusively. Any council world that needed protection and requested help. Stone objected again. That went far beyond their mandate and current mission scope. Earth Defense Command had no authorization for that level of engagement. Marcus acknowledged the concern, but held his ground. Then their mandate needed to change immediately. Earth had learned to defend itself because no one else would defend them. Now humanity had technology and capability to spare. They could be what the galaxy needed most. The species that arrived when aggression threatened the innocent. He looked at Harvest below, at cities that would survive because one human ship had chosen engagement over isolation. The Galactic Council had spent 3 centuries warning everyone to stay away from Terran territory. But maybe it was time for a new message. When you were in trouble, there was nowhere safer than Terran territory. And humanity was about to make that territory include anywhere that needed protection. Back on Earth, Commander Rita Hayes read Captain Webb's report and allowed herself a small smile. 3 centuries ago, the Krell had invaded and learned about human power. 6 months ago, the Valorians had trespassed and learned about human mercy. Today, Harvest learned about human purpose. The warning remained in every star chart. Forbidden to enter Terran territory. But now it had gained an unofficial addendum that spread through the galaxy faster than any official directive. Unless you need help, in which case, humanity will find you. The galaxy had finally learned that Earth's walls were never built to keep humanity contained. They were built to keep humanity safe until the rest of the galaxy was ready for what humans could become. That time had arrived, and humanity was just beginning to show what 3 centuries of preparation could accomplish when applied to protection instead of isolation.